Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank the witnesses for being here today. There is no question that Xi Jinping is looking to harness the power of emerging technologies deployed by the private sector to integrate with the People's Liberation Army's military weapons. Now, the question is how we can curb the flow of capital into China to help in the development of emerging technologies like AI and quantum computing. We need to implement a time-tested approach that includes our partners and allies, because our country cannot unilaterally reduce capital flows into the CCP. We need a clear strategy. So earlier there was a discussion, and I want to ask you for a clarification. Does Representative Barr's bill use the existing list we've been discussing in the hearing? Is that the approach? I'm asking you,
Okay,
Mr. Ashu.
Thank you. It does. No, I think the strength of the bill is that it leverages a time-tested and effective, already existing tool that the U.S. has.
Both Mr. Ashu and Mr. Ferro, in your view, how can we incentivize a multilateral approach to curbing the financing of emerging technologies in China? Do you believe imposing targeted sanctions can help? Mr. Ferro, you can go first.
I do think a multilateral approach can help. I do think that the targeted approach is important. As I suggested in my testimony, I think it's probably a combination of types of sanctions that would be most effective in this context. I agree with my colleagues that using targeted export controls, a sanctions-like regime that also involves export controls would be important, but the entity-focused approach is immediate and very efficient. I'll also just quickly say that it appears that venture capital investment and private equity investment into startups from the United States or from foreign investors writ large is incredibly down over the last few years. It's hard to say how much of that is actually smart money that is bringing something along with the investment that would be of benefit, and that executive order, for example, 14105, focuses on those intangibles. But you know, the importance of doing an entity approach or a sanctions approach is there's a huge ecosystem of consultants and advisors and others from the United States who provide those exact same intangibles, managerial experience, an understanding of relationships and networks and other types of guidance that would be prohibited by an entity-based or sanctions-based approach.
Would allies and partners be more willing to work with the United States to screen investments or to impose targeted sanctions?
I think the jury's out on that. Just a few days ago, the European Union, the European Commission released a white paper on whether or not it's going to create outbound investment controls similar to the United States. And essentially it said, we're going to take 2 years to collect data and decide if we even need to do this 2 years from now. So there's a lot of work to be done on the sort of screening approach or the new outbound investment approach. I think it would be, personally, I think given that so many countries around the world, allies and partners of the United States, are familiar with economic sanctions, and we've done them in a multilateral way, and export controls, by the way, in a multilateral way, that I think that there would be much more momentum in that regard.
You know, I believe, we all believe, a key to ensuring emerging technologies do not fall into the hands of our adversaries like China is to get our partners and allies on board with similar protective measures. I think we agree on that. Let me ask you, Mr. Ashu, are sanctions a time-tested and effective national security tool? And what would be the advantage of placing any regime into companies of concern under jurisdiction of Treasury's OFAC?
Because it's time-tested and effective. Again, the number one problem with a new regime is that it would automatically start by not being multilateral, because we'd be the only ones doing it. And that would be a disadvantage to the U.S. The SDN list, while it's not necessarily the product of a multilateral approach, it is well known and well regarded by our allies and friends, and that gives it strength. We cannot go it alone on this. In the U.S. export control system, if you're worried about a particular technology, such as artificial intelligence or any other emerging technology, that is already the subject of a multilateral process. That process can then be leveraged into the financing. So working with time-tested, effective tools should be the place where we start.
Thank you. My time's up. I yield back.